So great. So welcome to everybody, and because we have a tight schedule, thanks to Professor Hilal Ahmed for agreeing to not just write but also discuss his work. And the discussion is, in some sense, far more important because you get an insight and an explanation that often doesn't get covered in the written aspect. So, and it allows us to take this discussion forward and ask him his questions and so on. So let's deep dive right away.
Yeah.
We have Hilal presenting, and towards the end, by Hilal, so if about 40 minutes or so, so that we have just 12
Yeah.
minutes to ask you some questions.
Amir bhai, I would suggest that I should speak less, and
Okay,
we should have more discussion. So I'll try to be brief.
wonderful, wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
please. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, and thank you, Amir bhai, for this opportunity, and Anjana, and also accepting my request for this time. Uh, what I'm going to do is basically to make a disconnect between something that is coming to us as a natural and unproblematic entity, that is the relationship between Islam and Muslims. We think that whatsoever is written in the scriptures or holy texts are followed by Islam, therefore, and this is an old colonial understanding that in order to understand Muslim, you have to understand Islamic text, which is in some sense important. But at the same time, we also have to be very clear that text acquires their own meanings and their own imagination in concrete socio and political context. So this contextualization is important. So what I am going to do is to talk about Islam of Muslims in contemporary India. And for that, but there is actually another objective which I would like to share with you. The objective is to what kind of religion we observe, because it is also a dominant assumption that religion is something which we know and which is static and which is practiced in a similar way. But in my view, this is absolutely wrong. So the contextualization of the idea of religion itself is also very, very important, which I would like to point out in this presentation. I have been actually searching for past 15, 20 minutes. An advertisement you must have seen on various TV channels and OTT platform. And this advert, I couldn't find that. So that's why I'm going to play a different ad in order to, introduce you to the problem which I discovered in my work. And the advertisement is that an angry wife is looking at the photograph of her dead husband, saying that you did not actually fulfill all the expectations which we had as a family because you did not have a life insurance. Remember that life is always uncertain, but the manner in which the idea of insurance is introduced to us in modern life and contemporary life in India is very important. And that's the reason why that there are two things which are growing. One is uh, the material insurance in terms of insurance industry, and the second is that your search for a living God. So there is a correlation between the idea of living God and the idea of having some kind of an insurance. I have been puzzling with this question for a long time, and I would like to narrate an incident which led me to a very specific research question. The incident was this, that I was coming from Noida in a metro, and when I looked, and it was a completely packed metro. When I looked at the railings of the metro, I find that there are many young heads. All of these people are young people. They were working in various firms in Noida, and almost all of them were wearing rings with Rashi ke Nagini. Hmm? And at the same time, they had their mobiles. And then I tried to look at what kind of stuff they're watching on their mobile. To my surprise, that most of them were watching Hollywood films. This is something which actually makes me think that is there any correlation between the adherence to one kind of modernity that is always expressed in English, and there is also a sense that these rings are going to protect me in future. That's a problem which made me to think, and we included a set of questions in our surveys on religion and religiosity in 2016-17. And then I also repeated similar questions in Pew survey, which we did in 2021. And if you want, you can have an access to that survey. The survey is actually published by them. It is called Religion and Segregation in India. So it is there on Pew's website. Now, again, so that's the general picture in which we are going to place the question of Muslim religiosity. The second thing is that there is also a strong assumption that now Muslims are actually more religious than other communities. It is believed that other communities are less religious than Muslims. And this assumption is so powerful that the idea of Pakka Musalman is always coming to us as neutral, as uncontested. And it is seen that in order to understand Pakka Musalman, you have to be comparative in nature, and you can see that Hindus are not as Pakka as Muslims. So Muslims are more religious, but in our survey, we find that this is not true. The third objective was that the growing Hindutva, does it have any impact on Muslim religiosity? The assumption is that the moment uh, aggressive Hindutva established itself, Muslim communities would move inward and they would become more practicing. Now, these three questions I am interested in, and I would like to explore these questions. So I have taken 5 minutes of my time to contextualize this. Now, to be very brief, I would read out a few things and show you a few tables, and then I'll stop. As you can see that the title of my presentation is Muslim Imagination of Islam in India. This paper, which is submitted to you, and I hope that you must have seen it, critically engages with the premise that aggressive anti-Muslim Hindutva discourse eventually makes Muslim more religious-oriented and Islamic, interrogating the ways in which a seemingly linear and straightforward correlation is established between Hindutva and changing pattern of Islamic religiosity. The paper aims to map out the place of Islam in various survival strategies adopted by Muslims. More specifically, I explore two broad questions. A, what is the nature of anti-Muslim discourse in contemporary India? And B, how does it impact their religious orientation and practices? Now, what I am going to do is to place these two questions in the context which I have just presented to you. In order to explore these questions, I take a rather unconventional conceptual route. Instead of approaching Hindutva as a given and uncomplicated sociological phenomena, I make a conscious attempt to trace the constitutive feature of this discourse. Precisely for this reason, I find the term Islamophobia rather unhelpful and vague. Although it is true that the event like 9/11 contributed significantly to the already existing prejudices and stereotypes associated with Muslim communities, the contemporary form of anti-Muslim politics in India cannot merely be understood through the prism of Western debate on Islamophobia. It is important here to clarify what I mean by Islamic religiosity. Shahab Ahmed offers us a very valuable insight in this regard. He notes, and I quote, a meaningful conceptualization of Islam as a theoretical object and analytical category must come to terms with, indeed, be coherent with the complexities and often outright contradiction that obtain within the historical phenomena that has proceeded from the human engagement with the idea and reality of divine communication to Muhammad, the messenger of God. I find this argument analytically useful. The interplay between historical formation of a particular kind of Islam and the normative idea contained in the religious philosophical text actually determine the nature of religious performances. Hence, the ways in which Indian Muslim communities express their faith in what they identify as Islam becomes a possible vantage point to map out the character of those rituals and practices which are defined as Islamic. The Islamic religiosity, hence, I argue, is not merely about adherence to five pillars of Islam. Instead, it accommodates those context-specific practices that transform Islam into a lived phenomenon. Now, something about my method. I use survey data as empirical evidences to understand the ways in which Islam as a religion is observed by Muslim communities in contemporary India. This methodological preference raises an important question. Religion, especially when it is understood as faith, is often described as a philosophical phenomenon, an experience that is easy to feel but difficult to explain. The quantification of such experiences, we are told, is problematic, if not entirely undesirable. I do recognize the main thrust of this critique, yet I am not fully convinced that this line of reasoning is analytically helpful, especially in our Indian context. Religion as faith become more apparent when it is translated into actual social practices. It is therefore analytically legitimate to measure Muslim self-perception through survey method about the ritualistic practices such as offering namaz and or observing fast. It does not, however, mean that quantitative data and empirical details are self-explanatory hard facts. In my view, survey data does not provide any fixed, clear-cut, and unmistakable answer to the complex life questions. Instead, the quantitative data comes to us as raw information that would become meaningful and explanatory if it is placed in a fully worked out theoretical framework, and this is precisely what I am going to do in this paper. Let me just first start with the idea of Muslim politicophobia. Islamophobia, which simply means an intense dislike or fear of Islam and prejudice towards Muslim, is a Western notion. It aims to address the anxiety of white middle class population in US and Europe in the aftermath of the so-called war against terror. The Muslim identity, on the other hand, is an established problem category in India. The involvement and participation of Muslim community in political processes is often reduced to an imagined Muslim vote bank politics, while their social life is always seen as a symbol of backwardness. The event of 9/11 intensified such apprehensions. The popular global phrases like jihadi Islam, Islamic terrorism, Sharia rule, and so on offered new meanings to already established debates on Muslim separatism and Muslim isolation in India. This interesting merger between global anti-Islamism and anti-Muslim communalism led to a new political consensus which may be called the Muslim politicophobia. Political parties adopted this refined mode to address Indian Muslims in the post 9/11 scenario, not merely as a problematic religious minority, but also as a part of a global Islamic Ummah. Three defining features of this Muslim politicophobia are relevant to understand the changing political attitude towards Indian Muslims in last 2 decades. Number one, slow and gradual transformation of Indian Muslim identity into an ultimate reference point for global Islamic terrorism is the first feature of Muslim politicophobia. The Islamic connection between India's Muslim and the Islamic or jihadi organization is evoked as the most legitimate template for making sense of violent act associated with Islam and Muslim globally. Second, the fear of active Muslim engagement or even the lack of it is the second feature of Muslim politicophobia. The renewed debate on Muslim vote bank in last 3 decades is a good example of it. Muslims are alleged to vote as a collective in favor of a particular party at national level. In post-Babri Masjid scenario, the scope of this argument has been expanded. It is now claimed that Muslims primarily take part in electoral politics to teach a lesson to BJP. It means that whether Muslims participate in politics or they remain isolated to it, they would be always recognized as political being. Third feature of Muslim politicophobia is related to our political popular perception about Muslim as a politically conscious community, or this is what I called Siyasi Muslim. It is assumed that Muslims are fully conscious and informed of their collective rights, and hence they always take politically motivated decisions. This perception has found a different overtone in recent years. Every aspect of Muslim social life is seen through the prism of global jihadi politics. And this is quite evident these days. Now, what are the impact of this Muslim politicophobia on Muslim self-perception? Let us look at the Muslim responses to Muslim politicophobia. The Pew report, Religion in India, Tolerance and Segregation, is very relevant here. This study is a comprehensive, in-depth exploration of India's contemporary religious life. The report reveals that only 24% Muslims think that there is a lot of discrimination against them in India. This figure obviously destabilizes the commonsensical view. Aggressive Hindutva politics, supported by media-driven anti-Muslim discourse, had led to many violent episodes. In fact, lynching of innocent Muslim individuals in the name of cow worship has been completely normalized. It is legitimate for any curious observer of Indian public life to suspect this figure that only 24% Muslims think that there is a discrimination against them. The report, however, does not present this finding as conclusive answer. It unpacked this aggregate Muslim response in relation to regional diversity. This regional-wise assessment offers us a very different picture. And I would like to show you this table now. Let me share my screen with you. Could you just enable me to share
Yes,
my
sir,
screen?
you're a co-host now. You can share.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So you can see this table. Again, this is Pew survey, and you can see that in the north, it is 35%. 35% Muslim. The question was, Muslim who say that there is a lot of discrimination against Muslim in India today. At the all India level, we find only 24% Muslims said that yes, Muslims are facing some kind of a discrimination, and they individually faced a discrimination in last 1 year. But what is interesting is this unpacking of this. We find that this phenomena is predominantly north-centric, but at the same time, we find that Muslims in southern India are also conscious of the idea of discrimination. But there is other side of it. We also have to, I think there are 2 points which I would like to emphasize. The first point is the violent anti-Muslim Hindutva politics, again, as I said, is a north-center phenomenon. Although various reflection of this politics can be found in other part of the country, the Babri Masjid dispute, Shabano, Love Jihad, and the aggressive cow protection movement provide a contextual specificity to violent Hindutva in northern states. Second, this regional variation also demonstrates a very serious factor of our public life. The anti-Muslim discourse has now been completely normalized. We must remember that lynching of innocent Muslims or attack on mosques and other Muslim religious places of worship, even during the time of pandemic, are the violent outcome of a sustained multidimensional anti-Muslim narrative. This narrative has become a part of our everyday life, making communal remarks on Muslim individuals in public and spreading hate on social media are no longer seen as unusual or abnormal. This widespread normalization of Muslim bashing also influences Muslim opinion and perception. Thirdly, this table also shows that overall Muslim reaction to various facets of religious discrimination also point towards a failure of violent Hindutva essentialism. The act of lynching and its wider dissemination through popular media is guided by two related impulses. It aims to mobilize a community of anti-Muslim Hindu warrior, in the name of Hindutva. At the same time, there is a wider objective to create fear and terror in the minds of Muslims. The Pew survey and our CSDS survey also underline the fact that violent Hindutva politics has not yet succeeded in terrorizing the Muslims. Despite the fact that the violence is so normal, they still feel that for them it is quite obvious that only a section of radical Hindutva trying to create hate. So this, on the one hand, it is a normalization, and on the other hand, it also underlines the failure of Hindutva to mobilize all Hindus in its favor. Now, let me just come to the second point. The second point is that this discrimination and the context in which we live has forced Muslim to become more Islamic, or they started offering more prayers. They have become more religious and adherent of Islam, etc. I think this is an important question. As I said, that Muslim religiosity in India is always seen as a settled issue. It is strongly believed that Muslims are more religious than other communities, and every aspect of their social life, especially their political worldview, is determined by some kind of Islam. Interestingly, the contemporary Muslim imagination of Islam and religious practices are very different from these given explanation. Various surveys conducted by CSDS and the Pew survey, which we have been discussing now, and even some very important ethnographic works on Muslim communities tell us that Muslim religiosity is not at all a static phenomena. Muslims, like other religious communities, practice religion in a variety of different ways. Now, CSDS Lokniti's recent report, Indian Youth, Aspiration and Vision for the Future, is very relevant to make sense of the nature of religious observance among Muslim youth in India. It is found that a significant majority of Muslims offer prayer, yani namaz, on almost a regular basis. 86% said yes, and 45% out of 86 said that they offer namaz 5 times a day. This finding demonstrates that namaz is one of the major recognizable elements of Islam in India. However, this overwhelming acceptance of namaz must also be seen in a comparative manner. A similar study conducted by CSDS in 2016 gives us a different picture. At that time, around 97% Muslim claimed that they offered namaz on regular basis, which is reduced now to 86%. It means that there is a clear decline in the number of Muslim worshippers in last 5 years. One finds a similar pattern to the observance of fast or roza in the month of Ramadan. The 2021 CSDS report shows that around 80% Muslim respondent affirmed that they observe fast regularly. However, that was not the case in 2016. At that time, this figure was 93%. It means that from 93 5 years ago, it actually reduced to 85%, the observance of a roza. This comparative analysis, broadly speaking, shows that young Muslims are gradually moving away from religious practices. In fact, young Muslim women are relatively less religious than Muslim men. The caste divide among Muslims further complicate this picture. Muslim OBCs are more practicing in terms of offering namaz and recitation of Quran at all India level. However, the Muslim non-OBC communities especially in UP, are slightly more practicing, and I think UP Muslim are more practicing than UP Journal Muslim are more practicing than Muslim OBCs. I'll show you these tables in a while. Let us just look at the belief system. And this is an important table which I would like to share with you. Yeah, you can see this table now. This is the previous table which I was discussing. Muslim religiosity in a comparative sense. Men 83% offer namaz, and while women 84. For Rosa, Muslim men 84, while Muslim women 86. Read Quran, Muslim men 65 and Muslim women 61%. Again, these are actually based on survey data, so we should not exaggerate these findings as if that these are the final truth. But the most important table from my point of view is this one. The Pew survey, we asked this question. There were basically three questions altogether: belief in fate, belief in karma, and belief in astrology. Now look at the Muslim responses to that. 63% Muslims argue that they believe in fate. What is interesting is Muslim adherence to the idea of karma, meaning whatsoever I have done in the past is going to affect my present, and it will also affect my future, is 77%. Obviously, in a comparative sense, Muslim belief in astrology is not very significant. Hindu belief are also very, if you look at Hindu belief in naturally in astrology is very high. Now, if this is the case, then what we find that, let me just also show you the last table, which is the ritualistic religion. So we asked this question, do you think that there should be some kind of a ceremony when your daughter or son is born? We then also ask a question about a religious wedding ceremony for themselves or children in the family. And finally, the one question was with regard to religious cremation or burial for their loved one. So what we find that there is an overwhelming adherence to the idea of ceremonial or ritualistic religion. So I wanted to show you these, and let us just go back to analyzing these two tables. These findings must be seen in wider socio-cultural trends among different religious groups. The Pew survey becomes very useful, as I said. A significant majority of respondents, around 70%, claim that they believe in fate. The idea that life events of an individual are largely predetermined. Hindu 73%, Muslim 63%, and Sikh 59% strongly assert this view. This is also true about belief in karma. An influential majority of Hindu 77, Muslim again 77, and Jains 75 strongly adhere to this karma-oriented worldview. This centrality of religious performances and ritual is also very important. And then this ritualistic religion transforms every religious group into a culturally restricted social entity. This is certainly true about Hindus and Muslims. A clear majority of Hindu feels that a person who eats beef cannot be a Hindu. This view is even higher than the percentage of Hindu who would say a person cannot be a Hindu if he or she does not believe in God. So how do you relate to the idea of being a Muslim or a Hindu? For a Hindu, eating beef is the dominant marker by which you create a dividing line between a Hindu and a non-Hindu. For a Muslim, the dividing line is eating pork. It means that our eating habits are actually are becoming determining factor by which we identify ourselves as religious beings. Three features of this contemporary religion, meaning centrality of fate and karma, overt ritualism, and supremacy of cultural practices, point towards an interesting configuration. The factors such as fate, karma, and astrology pave the way for a strange process of individuation. So, this is an important point which I would like you to keep in mind. The individuation process. This belief system encourages an individual to think of his or her personal suffering as an outcome of his or her previous act and action. The impact of larger social, economic, and political processes on groups and communities are relegated to margin, and everything is explained in a highly personalized manner. So people would say that something bad is happening, and for that, I am responsible for it. So there is a complete disconnect between the processes which shape our outer environment and the belief system which we have in relation to what we call religion. The overt ritualism and supremacy of cultural practices, however, function differently. These features remind an individual that he or she belong to a well-defined religious cultural community. To assert his or her place in this communally marked social space, an individual has to follow the established values, practices, custom, and ritual of his or her particular community. This religious framework does not allow an individual to question internal boundaries of religion. So you are on the one hand left alone as an individual to believe in karma, etc., that this is you are responsible for all the problems of life you are facing. On the other hand, whenever you have to become a Hindu or a Muslim or a Jain or a Sikh, you have to follow the given ritualistic religion that is imposed on you. Now, this is the way in which we relate to the idea of religion. And that's why Hindu responses to Hindutva and Muslim responses to Islam are also determined by these two factors. Now, let me conclude by making two broad observations. Obviously, the survey data makes it clear that Muslim religiosity is gradually taking a new shape. The impact of 20th century Islamic religious reform movement, which actually defined the contours of the religious domain, is gradually declining. These movements are no longer capable of responding to the emerging social and cultural issues young Muslims often encounter. The gradual marginalization of Tablighi Jamaat is a good example in this regard. Tablighi Jamaat was a Sunni religious reform movement that redefined the concept of dawa in a significantly different way. Jamaat gives tremendous emphasis on namaz-centric religion to invite Muslims to embrace Islam in purely spiritual terms. This non-controversial notion of dawa became very attractive for traumatized Muslim communities in post-partition India. Tablighi Jamaat gradually became the most dominant form of Sunni religiosity in later decades. Tablighi Jamaat, however, has been facing a serious internal debate. In order to propagate a non-controversial Namaz-centric religion, Jamaat leader discourages discussion and deliberation even on a strictly spiritual aspect. There is no space for new ideas and energies in Jamaat's religious worldview. In a way, it has begun to disintegrate as a religious reform. The decline of such established form of Islamic religiosity, it seems, has begun to unsettle the Muslim religious imagination in a slow and gradual manner. It appears that they still offer namaz and observe roza to assert their Muslimness, yet there is a strong indication that there is an increasing detachment with these practices. A highly diversified form of Islamic conservatism, it seems, is established that not only defines the social outlook and cultural preferences of Muslims, but also determine the everyday meaning of religion and religiosity. My second and the final observation is about the complex Muslim responses to aggressive Hindutva. Our survey shows that young Muslims remain apprehensive about the fate of communal harmony in the country. A significant number of respondents also claim that they have experienced discrimination among friends because of their religion. These everyday concerns, however, are not entirely interpreted through the prism of religion or religiosity. Muslim respondents seem to interpret the growing intolerance in the country as a political phenomenon, which is often used for electoral mobilization. These two broad observations introduce us to the complexities of everyday life of Muslim communities. It appears that a thin dividing line between an inner domain of faith and the outer domain of politics is gradually taking a concrete shape. The inner domain is being reshaped to explore new moral and ethical possibilities within the framework of Islam. The aggressive Hindutva, on the other hand, is seen as an essential element of the outer political domain to work out various survival strategies in an overtly hostile anti Muslim environment. This tentative formulation, I argue, would become meaningful only if we explore various context specific manifestations of Islamic religiosity in contemporary India. So I stop here and thank you very much.